Cassidy.
It was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime, a couple's final African safari before settling into retirement. But within days, Bianca Rudolph was dead from a shotgun blast to the chest. Her husband, a wealthy American dentist, claimed it was a tragic accident. Yet whispers of infidelity, fast cremation, and a chilling restaurant confession would soon unravel a web of secrets 5 years in the making. They met in the late 1970s, while Larry Rudolph was in dental school at the University at Buffalo, and Bianca was attending the University of Pittsburgh. Larry Rudolph was a charismatic dental student with relentless drive. Bianca was an undergraduate, graceful, intelligent, and grounded. Their connection was immediate. Not long after graduation, they married, embarking on a life shaped by ambition, hard work, and adventure. Together, they raised 2 children, a son and a daughter, and built what looked, from the outside, like a picture-perfect life. Their son, Julian, is now an attorney based in Florida. Their daughter, Aina, chose to follow in her father's footsteps and became a dentist herself. She now works at the family's dental practice. Larry founded Three Rivers Dental, a practice in Pittsburgh that grew into a multi-million-dollar operation. He was a skilled dentist and an even more skilled businessman, admired by patients and respected by peers. Bianca managed the home front with quiet strength. She was deeply devoted to her children and unfailingly supportive of her husband. Friends described her as elegant and loyal, a woman who made everyone around her feel at ease. But their bond went deeper than family or business success. Larry and Bianca shared a taste for the extraordinary. They were avid big game hunters. Over the years, they traversed the globe in search of lions, leopards, antelope, chasing adrenaline and trophies through Africa, Asia, and beyond. It wasn't just a shared hobby. For them, the hunt was a lifestyle, a mutual obsession that seemed to keep their marriage exciting and their spirits aligned. Their home brimmed with taxidermy, safari photos, and stories of exotic terrain. In October 2016, they planned what was supposed to be one last adventure together, a return to the vast wilderness of Zambia's Kafue National Park. For Bianca, it would be her final chance to legally hunt a leopard, the last animal needed to complete her collection. She had tried for years to find one, and now, finally, she hoped to complete the pursuit. The trip lasted about 10 days. To everyone around them, it appeared joyful. Their game scout, Spencer Kokoma, observed the couple laughing, hugging, even kissing. "I was admiring them," he later said, "because I'm also married." They looked happy, no tension at all. Each day followed a rhythm: hunting, cleaning weapons, preparing for the next. On their final day, Spencer followed standard protocol. The firearms were cleared of ammunition before returning to camp. Larry and Bianca were set to leave the next morning. Bianca not having realized her dream of taking down a leopard. But just before dawn, as the first light filtered through the trees, a single gunshot cracked through the air near their cabin. Camp staff rushed toward the sound. Inside, they found Bianca lying on the floor, unresponsive, a wound in her chest. Spencer Kokoma, the game scout who had spent the previous 10 days with the couple, had been working about 30 yards away when he heard the blast. He ran to the cabin and froze. Bianca, 56, was dead. She had been shot in the heart with a 12-gauge shotgun. The weapon lay partially inside a soft-sided case beside her. Larry stood nearby, sobbing uncontrollably. "He's crying, Spencer would later recall, saying, 'Let me just kill myself because my wife, she has committed suicide. She has killed herself. I want to kill myself also.'" In that moment, Larry claimed that Bianca had taken her own life, that she had shot herself intentionally while he was in the bathroom. Then, in a wave of grief, he ran to a nearby river, threatening to drown himself. Spencer followed, calmed him down, and walked him back to the cabin. The police soon arrived at the scene and brought Larry in for questioning. Something changed. Larry had a different story. Now he said it wasn't suicide. but a tragic accident. Instead, Bianca had been packing her shotgun, he claimed, when it discharged. After considering the evidence, and 2 days later, the police report declared it an accident. The report stated that Dr. Lawrence Rudolph rushed to the bedroom only to find his wife lying on the floor bleeding. The findings suggested the firearm was loaded from the previous hunting activities, causing the firearm to accidentally fire. The Zambian authorities accepted Larry Rudolph's explanation without much resistance. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses, no obvious motive. Larry was cooperative, grieving, and, at least on the surface, convincing. And then, almost immediately, he called the U.S. Embassy in Lusaka. He reported Bianca's death and requested assistance. He needed to arrange paperwork, settle logistics, and more urgently, he wanted her body cremated. By the end of that very same day, October 11th, 2016, the wheels were already in motion. With help from the embassy, Larry completed the consular report of death abroad, secured the necessary permissions, and arranged for Bianca's remains to be cremated locally. A Zambian funeral home carried out the procedure with shocking speed. Within 72 hours, her ashes were in an urn, and Larry was on a plane home. The trip of a lifetime had ended in silence. But back in the United States, the silence didn't last long. Nearly 2 weeks after Bianca Rudolph's death, family and friends gathered in Arizona to remember her. But at Larry's Pennsylvania dental practice, something was off. There was a hush in the air. Staff were told not to talk about what had happened. Larry never mentioned Bianca's death, not once. According to one staff member, he was saying to everyone not to talk about it. It made it sort of suspicious. Even more disturbing, Larry didn't inform their children about their mother's passing for nearly a week. Julian, their son, now an attorney in Florida, and Anna, their daughter, who had followed in her father's footsteps as a dentist at his practice, were both blindsided by the delay. And then came the most jarring revelation for those who knew Bianca best: the cremation. Bianca was a devout Catholic. Her beliefs were unwavering. She had told friends she wanted a traditional burial. Cremation wasn't just unlikely, it was unthinkable. So why had Larry arranged it so quickly and without consulting the children? To some, it looked like a grieving husband making decisions in haste. To others, it looked like the first deliberate move in a much darker plan. One of Bianca's closest friends couldn't let it go. Troubled by Larry's behavior and the rapid cremation, she contacted the FBI. She opened what would become a Pandora's box. According to the FBI's complaint, the friend reported that Larry had been having a long-term affair, had been verbally abusive to Bianca, and that they had often fought over money. The friend's tip was enough to raise suspicions. But she wasn't the only one concerned. Even the consular chief at the U.S. Embassy in Zambia had doubts. Just hours after Bianca's death, he spoke on the phone with Larry and got a bad feeling. The consular chief, a former Marine with decades of experience handling weapons, became suspicious when Larry quickly pushed for cremation and an exit from the country. Acting on instinct and unbeknownst to Larry, the consular chief decided to personally inspect Bianca's body before the cremation. He measured the shotgun wound, he took photos, and based on what he saw, he didn't believe Bianca could have done it to herself. The position of the wound, the angle, it looked to him like someone had fired the shotgun from several feet away. He turned his photos and notes over to the FBI. Quietly but thoroughly, an inquiry into Bianca Rudolph's death was underway. After returning to the United States with Bianca's ashes, Larry Rudolph resumed life with striking ease. He returned to his multi-million-dollar dental practice in Pittsburgh, greeted patients, and carried on as though the tragedy in Zambia had never happened. But beneath the surface, quiet murmurs and deep suspicions were already spreading. The FBI had launched a formal inquiry into Bianca's death. What began with a single phone call from a concerned friend slowly evolved into one of the most methodical and far-reaching investigations the Bureau had ever undertaken, involving a U.S. citizen overseas. Over the next 5 years, agents pursued the case with quiet determination, digging into the couple's history, tracking financial records, conducting forensic analyses, and speaking with anyone who had known them. Their goal: to piece together the truth of what really happened in that safari cabin in Kafue National Park. At the center of their growing suspicions was Lori Millerun. Lori was not just an employee at Larry's practice, she was also his longtime lover. In fact, the affair had been going on for years. Some believed it had spanned decades. It wasn't exactly a secret either. One former colleague said, "Larry and Lori's affair just seemed like it was very open. As far as I know, it was probably going on for 20 years. It was just uncomfortable, and you just didn't talk about it." If Bianca had ever suspected something, she had kept it to herself. But in hindsight, the picture that emerged was damning. Friends told the FBI that Larry had long been verbally abusive, that the couple fought often, especially over money, and that their relationship had grown colder in recent years. Bianca's sudden cremation, the conflicting explanations about her death, and reports of the long-standing affair had all stirred suspicion. But what solidified those doubts was a series of detailed investigations by the FBI. Over 5 years, they interviewed dozens of witnesses, revisited the game scout Spencer Kokoma, reviewed emails and text messages, analyzed photos from the scene, and conducted forensic tests. The FBI's findings culminated in a criminal complaint that laid out a compelling narrative. At its core, it alleged foul play and pointed to Lawrence Rudolph as the man who orchestrated his wife's death. Among the most incriminating pieces of evidence was motive: money. Larry Rudolph was the beneficiary of 9 separate life insurance policies and stood to gain nearly $5 million from Bianca's death. Bianca died on October 11th, and by October 31st, Larry had already submitted the first insurance claim. But it wasn't just about the money. FBI investigators also focused on the physical evidence, particularly the ballistics. They compared shot patterns by firing from various distances and estimated that Bianca's wound, as seen in photographs, was created by a shot from a distance of between 2 and 3½ feet. The complaint's conclusion was stark and unequivocal. Bianca Rudolph was not killed by an accidental discharge. And it wasn't just ballistics catching the attention of the FBI. The timeline, the insurance claims, the affair, and inconsistencies in Larry's accounts all began to form a web of suspicion that the agents could not ignore. But perhaps the most chilling moment came in public, at a restaurant. According to a witness, Larry and Lori were out dining when they began arguing loudly. The witness, who knew them personally, recalled that Larry became agitated and then blurted out, "I killed my f***ing wife for you." It was a bombshell moment. The witness went to the FBI, and the statement was ultimately included in the case against him. Whether it was a confession or an outburst made in anger, investigators saw it as yet another thread in a dark tapestry of deceit, betrayal, and murder. The truth about the death of Bianca Rudolph, wife, mother, and accomplished big game hunter, remained as elusive as the Zambian leopard she had hoped to track. But nearly 5 years after her death, the United States government formally charged her husband, Larry Rudolph, with murder and mail fraud. His arrest in December 2021 marked a dramatic shift in what had long seemed an unresolved tragedy. While Rudolph resumed life in the United States with striking ease, returning to his multi-million-dollar dental practice in Pittsburgh and entertaining guests at homes in Arizona and Mexico, investigators worked in silence. They built a meticulous case, combing through forensic records, financial statements, and interviews with dozens of witnesses. But the case would become even more complex. In February 2022, the public learned that Lori Milleran, Larry's longtime mistress and former office manager, was also being charged. The woman at the center of a secretive but long-running affair now faced 7 federal counts, including obstruction of justice and perjury. Prosecutors alleged she had provided false and misleading testimony to a grand jury sitting in the District of Colorado. Just over a month after that testimony, Milleran was arrested. As if the story couldn't get any stranger, it now featured 2 people, once lovers, now co-defendants, standing trial together in a federal courtroom. Their attorneys fought to have the trials separated, fearing the combined image of Rudolph and Milleran seated side by side would damage Lori's defense. They lost that motion. It was a powerful visual, one that prosecutors would later wield with effect. The case against Rudolph rested on a compelling blend of forensic and circumstantial evidence. Forensic ballistics showed that the shot which killed Bianca could not have been self-inflicted. FBI experts testified that her wound was consistent with a blast fired from at least 2 to 3.5 feet away, contradicting Larry's version of events. The criminal complaint flatly concluded Bianca Rudolph was not killed by an accidental discharge. Meanwhile, the financial evidence added to the portrait of a motive driven by greed. Larry stood to collect nearly $5 million in life insurance payouts from 9 separate policies. Bianca died on October 11th, and by October 31st, Larry had already submitted the first claim. But perhaps most damning were the words attributed to Rudolph himself. A witness recalled seeing Larry and Lori at a restaurant, arguing. In a moment of agitation, Larry reportedly exclaimed, "I killed my Fang wife for you." The witness, familiar with both Larry and Lori, reported the statement to the FBI. Whether a slip of the tongue or a raw confession, it was included in the case file and echoed throughout the courtroom. The prosecution anticipated the defense's argument that the affair with Lori was not a secret and, therefore, not a compelling motive for murder. In a pretrial affidavit filed by Rudolph's lawyers and signed by Lori herself, she admitted, "Larry and I were romantically involved, and Mrs. Bianca Rudolph was aware of that." But prosecutors weren't persuaded. They saw a calculated plan, driven by financial ambition, and a desire to be free from a wife who stood in the way. In August 2022, a jury in Denver found Larry Rudolph guilty of murdering his wife and committing mail fraud. Lori Milleran was convicted of being an accessory to murder, obstruction of justice, and 2 counts of perjury. The sentencing would be equally severe. On June 23, 2023, Lori Milleran was sentenced to 17 years in federal prison. 2 months later, on August 21st, Larry Rudolph received a life sentence and was ordered to pay more than $15 million in fines and property forfeitures. Both have filed appeals. But for many, justice had finally spoken. The saga of Larry Rudolph, Bianca's mysterious death, and the woman who stood beside him in court had captivated the public. A tale of privilege, betrayal, and a fatal safari trip that ended not with the roar of a leopard, but with the bang of a shotgun.
Cassidy.